Okay, so there are a lot of components if you want to have this kind of talent program and so on. Because later, you know that Ramesh will be joining me later this, because you mentioned him in the Indian Wonder. He will come later today to comment together with me because, you know, I don't know if we have been spoken about this, but we have a talent program in Norway now with Offerspill and Magnus Carlsen, and Ramesh is the main trainer of this. You know, we cooperate and discussing a lot about the difference between India and Sweden and Norway and so on. But there is one thing that I think is one of the keys that you didn't mention, I think, and that is the good environment. Oh, you did it a little bit, but for me, I think that is the key. You know, a group of players that like to work together, a good environment, a good inspiring leader. What is your thought on that? Is that something you would also try to implement?
Well, absolutely. The environment is what you create with your people surrounding you, right? But of course, that's a very nice setup if you create clubs, for example, where you want the youngsters to get together and to know each other better, to learn from each other. This is exactly what I'm planning to do with my foundation, to have a club. Maybe it's online, of course, it's easier at first, but indeed, it's very important for the youngsters to have a place where they understand each other very well. And of course, chess connects us, as my slogan goes for the Global Chess Festival. And I do believe that youngsters can develop very well, and they can get stronger by communicating with each other and have a very healthy rivalry. And this is what I feel in India, that they have plenty of talented kids. And I'm sure in your initiative, also in Sweden, you have very talented kids, but of course it matters a lot with whom they can socialize with, and if they have the same problems, then they can of course solve the problems better, and they can feel that what they are doing, it's important. Because I think generally in the world, it is in many places, when you say that you want to be a professional chess player, they might say, chess, I mean, this is just a game, right? So it's important that other people around you can value and appreciate your work and your progress.
So because, I mean, for you, for example, you had this social environment by natural because you had your sisters playing as well, you know. So I guess you had a great, you know, a great gang around you, and your father supported you and so on. But, you know, for example, for me, my parents didn't play chess. I had no one surrounding. It was all on my own. But of course, then I had my friends that I was working with continuously, and that is one of the first things I try to do, to create, you know, friends amongst the players, have a good, nice environment so they have good joy and so on. Also in this tournament, that is what the driving force. It should be so nice to be here. So you want to come back and you meet your friends. Anyway, could you say now, when you play this type of tournaments, the kind of youngsters tournament, what is important to think about if you want to make a good result? Can you give them any hints or tips for this tournament? We are now going for the 5th round today. Of course, we have the 2 grandmasters in top, but also, you know, the international masters, but a lot of them wants to grow and make a better result in the final rounds. What should they think of?
Well, first of all, what worked for me back when I was still in competition is to have a regime, to have a routine kind of lifestyle, that you sleep well. That's important. So to be able to focus and put all of your attention into the game. It's very important to get over on mistakes, because mistakes has to be analyzed, but only after the game, or moreover after the tournament, depending on the mistake itself. Of course, you have to be very self-critical, because that's how you grow and you can make a better game in the next one. But don't go too harsh on yourself. I think that's also extremely important. So keep the self-confidence, know your values, your strength, and build on them. But at the same time, build your weaknesses as well. But of course, chess as a sport is something that has a lot of components of being successful. And it means that, for example, time management is very important. So make sure that you don't get in time trouble. That's always very useful. And make practical decisions, because it's not necessarily all the time that you have to go for the best move. But what worked for me, at least for a long time, definitely when I was considering the time element of the game, the tournament situation, my not only mood, but my form. Because, of course, if you feel that simply everything goes on your way, then you can make riskier decisions also. But if you spend the time on every decision, you have your method, how you eliminate moves or how do you make your decision in choosing the move, don't regret it. Next game, it will be better. So I think it's very important to have that fresh look on every game, and also to move on and don't get destroyed if anything goes wrong.
Because, you know, in this tournament we even have this new time limit. You know, you have 90 moves, 90 minutes for the full game, and 30 seconds as an increment, and that's all. No extra time coming in after 40 moves. And for me, you know, I'm so old now, Judit, you know that. So I didn't play with this when I was young. You know, we had this, you know, 2 hours for 40 moves, then 1 hour for the rest. And I just feel this is quite different, you know, this type of play that you have today with this increment, and not the least when there is no added time after 40 minutes. So
the time
yeah.
control, I think, generally is a very sensitive issue, for me at least. And it started back in the early 2000s. I remember in Bled, I think we had in 2002, which was before most of the participants here was born. But I think that was the first time when I played this time control for 90 minutes, 30 seconds, and no increment. Though maybe we had some increment later on. It is also extremely important for the youngsters to understand what it means, this increment. It means that in the beginning, you can really go into a deep think in the opening or even in the middle game. But once you go down in time, it means that you have to switch your mindset, that it's kind of a blitz mode, but you still have to take it very seriously. You cannot go out to the bathroom and stuff like that. So there are some practical issues there also with the time control. But I think it is very important to make practice and really to be aware of the dangers and the benefits also of this time control, because also nowadays I think still we have different time controls in different tournaments, which makes it also something that the youngsters really have to be very resilient in their mind with the time control, with what kind of openings they do. And of course, I want to make extra focus that they have to work on their end games because of this also, that at the end game part, they will not have enough time. So this is why you have to learn a lot of theoretical end games and to have a good feel about it.
I know that you are on the run, that you are going to next meeting, but before you leave, is there anything you want to say to this youngster now fighting for the tournament win in the 9th edition of Uppsala Young Champions? I give you the final word.
What can I say? First of all, I think I would need to congratulate for the organizers for doing so, because giving opportunities to youngsters, it is an elementary thing, and that's the greatest things the youth can have. For the players, I would like to say that please play in a fair play manner, whether it's online or offline event, whenever you play, because that pays off, I believe. And also you can have a good feeling about yourself. And the kids, youngsters, they're all talented who are here. So believe in yourself and make the right moves on and off the board.
Thank you so much, Judith, for joining in, and good luck with all your project. You should know, I know, she has much more in her sleeves than she had the chance to tell us about now, so you're a busy woman. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thanks, bye, good luck.
question is, now the question is, hur länge har jag pratat? How long have I been? I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. I had some problems here. So let's take a look at this. Knight to d4, bishop e2. Okay, so now of course you can take on f3 or you can take on e2. Black choose to take on e2. That I'm not sure about that choice. Maybe there are other possibilities, of course, to take on f3, to take like this, and then you have your knight here ready to do something. Okay, so bishop e7. Okay, again we have a bit of an odd situation. You have bishop to e2, bishop e7, h3, bishop d7, bishop e3, h6. Okay, let's take a look at this position. The queen is on e2. It's supporting the e4 pawn, of course, but mainly just took back the bishop on e2. And now, what I thought was a bit strange here is that this is the worst bishop for white. And I would have preferred to take on f3. But okay, to take here, of course, maybe you can take on f3 later. That is, of course, a possibility. Now, what black wants to do is normally to get this bishop out. Either you play g6, bishop g7 or something like that, or you try to be quicker. And that was happened in the game, bishop to e7. And after that, normally you try to move away your knight. And then you go for either bishop g5 or f5, castling, moving away your knight, and then you go for f5 somehow. Now h3 came, and if you take on f3, no doubt white will be slightly better always in this position because you have the better bishop. You have more space behind these pawns in the center. So bishop d7, bishop e3, a6. Okay. Okay, for me, this must be a bit better for white in this position. You know, I think, you know, okay, the only thing that black has managed to do is actually to swap off one piece of, you know, one part of minor pieces. So that is, of course, one thing that you want to do when you have a little bit less of space. So that is one thing that is okay for black. But if you normally you want to have also sometimes you want to have a knight on d7 to be able to go to c5. And this bishop, it doesn't do anyone happy in this position. And like I said, most likely this knight will try to move away at some point, either to h5 or somewhere else, and then f5 or maybe bishop g5 will come. But for me, no doubt, white has got a slight edge in this position. And one classical way to play, for example, is to play for c5. Because if you play c5, it is difficult now to take on c5 because then the pawn is hanging on e5, and this is normally favorable for white. And the other idea that white can have, if you do not want to play on the queen side, is to go further on the king side, and that could be to play with g4 like this, and try to push against when the king is castled like this. But for me, at this point, normally you want to wait with g4 until black is actually threatening to do something like f5 or something like that. And not the least, you want to wait until black has castled. So, okay, a6 came, like that. So now white will have a choice. What is interesting here is that Francesco Sonis has used only 4 minutes, but as well as the increment. And that is, of course, a sign that he knows what he's doing. He has maybe even had this position on the board. What he's threatening to do now, there could be a possibility, is to play it for b5 in this position. Because b5, if white tries to take back with a knight, then this pawn might be a problem on e4. So Another possibility that is quite common is to try to get this knight to a better place. So to play, for example, knight to d2 to get, and one good thing with knight to d2 is also that this idea with knight to h5 is not possible. And actually in this position it's not possible now either. Knight h5 take on e5 is a little bit of a tactical trick, and you have this one hanging on h5. So okay, a6. It's a little bit challenging move in that sense that, okay, I do not castle immediately. I just wait a little bit to see, are you ready to go for g4 before I have made my castling? Or what do you want to do? And, you know, to see what is the strategy of white. But I think that either knight d2 or maybe c5 immediately. Of course, b4 could be a possibility as well, but then maybe a5 will come when you have something to challenge on b4. So, okay. Let's say we continue. Here, let's go to the other game. Let's go for the other main game of today. We have the game between Felix Bluberger against Alam Adraulf. And yeah, I think that the interesting thing, first of all, will be to see what kind of mood Alam is in today, because he has played a very different type of chess so far. He has had a very tactical games, two tactical games against Fredrik Kåsen, and not the least this tactical Sicilian game that he won in brilliant style, but also a very, very strategic maneuvering game, mainly in the first round where he played the Caro-Kann. And we'll see how we will face this with Felix. Felix, I think he has played so far very good. He had a solid draw yesterday against Francesco Sonis from Italy. He is white. So first question is, of course, what will the challenge be in the opening? Because when Seaman was here some days ago, he said that the only problem for Elam, or at least it had been, is his openings. That he had not had any real good opening repertoire. But lately he has been working quite hard on his openings, so now this might not be a weakness anymore. But let's see, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and then of course now black can go for bishop b4 and going into the Nimzo Indian, but he chose to play d5, and we have a classical Queen's Gambit. And now there you probably know that c take d5, e take d5, bishop g5 is very common these days, but he played the classical line of bishop g5, bishop e7, and now instead took. But the difference is that if you play this without having made bishop g5, bishop e7, then it's not so interesting to take on d5, but with a knight. But now you have the chance to do that, so that was done. So we have this position. And of course now the question is how white should proceed. It is possible to play with e4 like this, and then we have this kind of structure. White has got this good structure in the center, but black has managed to swap up some pieces, and quite often you can play c5, b6, bishop b7 and try to put pressure on these pawns and have a good game. So, okay, instead Felix plays something solid, queen c2. Okay, in this position now, white, has not made a choice yet, if it is e4 that will come or not. Castle came, logical move, knight f3, he doesn't want to show if he's going to play e4 or not. b6 came. Okay, here we have a little bit, now I understand the idea of white here a little bit, because if you play e4, black's idea will be to take on c3 and then play b6 and challenging the e4 pawn with a bishop on b7 like that. That's logical if you play e4, take c3, b3. But now instead black plays b6 because there are simply no good waiting moves probably in this position for black. So b6 came. Knight take d5 is now the idea, e take d5, and this is classical, because the idea is now that when b6 is played, it's not so attractive to have the pawn on d5, because as you can see, this diagonal is closed by the pawn on d5. So, okay, b6 came, knight take d5, e take d5, and rook c1. What white wants to do is to put pressure on c7, and if you play c6 like this, you understand that this knight will have some problems to move out. Probably black will need to play like bishop b7, rook c8 before you can move out the knight, or something like that. So then you might have some small problems. So instead of the knight's rook to c1, I believe that, you know, I don't know what to play here. What is the best to do? Because now it's a little bit critical here, I think, you know. Because if you play like c6, I think white is simply, you know, a little bit better in this position. Because you have some problems with coming out with your pieces, and white will play bishop d3, castling, and can, you know, have some pressure on the queen side. So I would be a bit worried here. So rook c1, rook to c1. Okay. So what should black play here? One thing that strikes you when you see this position is, of course, the white king. It will actually take a while until the king has castled and come to safety. e3, bishop d3, and then castling. Okay. So yeah. So the question is if there is any way for black to get compensation if you try to do something else. Could you, sometimes you can even try to do, I don't know, maybe sacrifice this pawn. Is that possible? I mean, something like that. Okay, there's even a, you know, because now you are threatening to go for c8 maybe. And then you have the checks here. So that can, because now you know this can be rather dangerous, this type of idea. I'm not saying that it is, but maybe it's too, you know, maybe I thought about, I don't know how what this is like, you know, this type of line, if this is threatening the rook, and then queen b4, how dangerous is that? Maybe it's not dangerous at all. I don't know, but I don't know. This is at least a little bit tricky because queen b4 is quite annoying here. These pieces are not out, and if the queen comes in and start to grab pawns, you might have a good position. So so it might be that this is what Elam now is thinking about. Oh, sorry. This is what Elam is thinking about in this position. Knight f3, b6, knight take, pawn take, rook c1. Like this. Here is the question. Should you go for some kind of pawn sacrifice? And yeah, I mean, if you play bishop a6, of course that could be done. Then I guess you just play, do you play e3 simply, I think? And this is very strange place, this one. Maybe something like that, I don't know, c5 maybe. And the idea now is that if you want to grab this pawn, you have to take on a6, bishop take a6, but then the king will be stuck. This is typically what can happen, you know, in this type of positions. So if you go for this, take here, pawn take, like this. Yeah, maybe this is what should be played actually. And now I'm not sure you want to take here. Maybe you just play bishop b2, castling, and then go for a pressure on these pawns, because this is a little bit strange place. This knight on a6 might be a possibility to go for this, but I don't know. It's already quite tricky position. I'm sure this is known from theory, but unfortunately this is not a line that I have been updated on. So I cannot give you the latest fashion on how to play here or what to do. But I believe that this is actually a critical moment for Elam if he has not been preparing for this line. Because now you have a difficult choice. Should you go for a grim defense with c6, or should you try to be active with c5 or try to sacrifice the pawn in somehow? Very, very interesting moment of the game. And you can see that Elam is spending his time now. He has to make a decision. Should he play stay solid, or should he go for some kind of counterattack that might be dangerous if you have not been preparing for that this morning? Okay, let's go to another game. Let's see what we have. What do we have? This cannot be the game. There are some boards here that I cannot believe that they are correct. So let's check. This is okay. Let's take a look at this game. This is for Fredrik Korsen against Arvin Rasti. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, queen a4 check. Okay, this is a line that the idea is to force the knight to c6, because you can see the bishop here is threatened by the queen. And the idea is now that this knight should be a bit misplaced. On the other hand, this queen might beat as well. So you have to make a judgment. And simply go back to c2, and what you say is that this knight is worse on c6 than my queen was on a4, because normally what you want to do is to put it on d7 or something like that and play c6 or c5, or at least, if you could, you c5, jump over the knight, but that's not allowed. So take on c4. So the question is how black should play here, because you have a structure that it's more or less like the queen's gambit, but the difference is that the knight is on c6. So white in that sense have made the black pieces coming on a little bit strange squares. Take on c4, bishop takes c4, bishop d6, castling, and e5, of course. Yeah, this is logical. I think that with the knight on c6 to take on c4 and then go for e5 seems to me very logical, because what you do is that you say, okay, I play without my c-pawn. Instead, I challenge your center with the e-pawn instead, opening up for the bishops and so on. And not the least, there might be an attack on the white king due to that the black pieces on c6, d6, f6 are ready to go for an attack. You have a little bit more active play. So white has got, in a way, a better structure, a little bit better structure, not the least when this knight is here, but black has got some activity when it comes to the pawn play. So h3 came. Interesting move, because you take away the bishop g4, that is the logic place for this bishop, because you can see it cannot go to f5, because the queen is here, not on e6, because you have a bishop here. So you have some problems with where your pawns should be. But of course, the main idea for black would also be to take on d4, and after e take d4, you'll have a classical Isolani position, but with the difference that also with the Isolani, normally the idea is to have control of d5 with the pawn on c6 and so on. And this is not the case with the knight on c6. So you can see from a strategic point of view in this game, it's all about this knight on c6. The queen was forcing it to go to c6. White is then trying to get a structure with this, where this knight is misplaced. Black is trying to make use of it. I earned a tempo while you played queen a4 and then went back. And I want to show that my knight is actually not that bad on c6. So, okay, now black played knight b4. And if you want to play a classical Isolani game with black, the idea, like I said, was to play like c6, knight bd7, bd5, like that. But, most likely there is no other way to do it. This move, like rook e8, to take the open line, this is a little bit, I would say this is a little bit dangerous, because you feel that there is something strange with this, but also, yeah, there is no real harmony in this, game, because if you play bishop e6, you can take, and there is d5 that might work, and you win a piece maybe. So you do not even threaten to play bishop e6. So here actually, maybe b4 is knight b4 is the best move. Bishop b3. Here we had, that was actually an interesting move, because I was not sure where to go with the queen, because if you go right now, black's problem is also the bishop on c8, where to place it. And with the queen on this diagonal, that outrules bishop f5. And that I think is interesting. So let's see, bishop b3, came bishop f5. I think that was quite good. I think this was actually, I would have preferred to play in this position. I would have played bishop to b1. Okay, I will have a new guest in just 5 minutes. So I will just take a short break while we let Jon Christian Hark coming in. So I will be back in 5 minutes and then we continue. So just a short break and then...